Hi. So I want to talk about this because I think it's important. It kind of has some interesting issues. In this situation, David Gaider is conflating two groups and trying to come to a conclusion based off of that conflation. I don't necessarily think he understands what types of groups that are at play here. I think he's taking both those audiences and meshing them together. Because I feel like when it comes to fans, there's a core audience, obviously, there's your core audience, and then there's the expanded audience, or the quote unquote modern audience, which is just a bunch of people on Twitter trying to make everything about them and their sexuality and their personality. They're little quirks that they're using to substitute personality for. I think those are two separate groups that are involved in the situation. The core group actually wants the game to retain what it was in its earliest iterations. And they want you to continue making things like that because that's when they felt the games were good. Now, the expanded audience wants you to throw in a bunch of little things that are in games that probably have nothing to do with this particular game. And when you create games based off of their interests and likes, it turns into games like the Veligard, which then you start seeing wonky model designs, you start seeing like weird ideas, political themes that really have no bearing on the fictional world because it's so on the nose, painfully on the nose, that it's like modern American politics that people really aren't that interested in. And it turns people off. And then there's this thing that happens where people tend to become apathetic towards that, and then they want to see these businesses or these IPs fail. That's where we are seeing this. But I'm gonna read this because I want you to see exactly where his thinking is on this. David Gaider, a former lead writer of Dragon Age, warned about what he describes as anti-fans who wants games to fail in order to send the developers and others like them a lesson. Again, it's not the group you think it is who is wanting to do this. The core audience, the people that feel like they're jilted, are basically wanting this game to be great. But if you're not going to listen to your core audience and the people that actually bought the games in the first place, if you're going to cater to a group that you think you're going to net because you're changing something to fit the modern interpretations of what people think is cool, you're going to turn off your core base and they're going to sit back and let you make that mistake. They're not going to stick around to buy that thing, and if it fails, then you've justified everything that they told you. But go on. Speaking of Games Radar, Gaider broached the subject of anti-fans by specifically talking about the RPG audience. He said the RPG audience doesn't really agree with itself as to what an RPG requires, and they could get very loud. The difficulty is suddenly you end up with anti-fans. It's worded weirdly, so stick with me here. Then they turn from what you want, fans who would go out and spread word of your game and get people interested, he elaborated. But if you get anti-fans, they sort of do the opposite. They're very determined suddenly to see your game fail as sort of a lesson to others who would make games of the same type, right? And that, honestly, these days, there's some element of that present in almost all fandoms, but it's always sort of been there for RPGs in particular. Gaider went on to share that he believes some of this behavior comes from people making the video games they like part of their identity, he explained. You also just get, I think, an element where more and more fandoms are making the things that they're fans of integral to their identity. And if that's integral to their identity, anything that affects or insults it insults them. You know what I mean? They're so invested in making what they imagine that, like I said, if they turn into the anti-fans, suddenly it's their personal investment in seeing that fail or seeing the developers who made that decision be punished, so that they could point in the future and say, well, see what happened to them? See how their game sold? You don't want that, do you? And even then, they have to sort of manipulate the data or move the goalposts. It seems like it's become increasingly vital for these people to be able to run around and make their points online, he continued, to the point that I think a lot of developers more and more are the kind of withdrawing from the public sphere, because it feels like sometimes when I talk to other developers, it feels like familiarity breeds contempt. The more access they have directly to a developer, like name that they can attach. I'm kind of confused. So the people that he's talking about, the ones that make the game their identity and try to make their identity more of the character, those aren't the core fan base. The core fan base has always been there and has always been interested in the game for what it does. The people that are coming in and trying to make characters fit within their identity are the types of people that probably come from Tumblr and they think their sexuality determines their personality, their political affiliation determines their personality, and so on and so forth. Those are the types of people that you have brought in because you wanted to make games like Veligard or some of the later games where you're adding more of a social engineering aspect to it, or you're leaning into political themes that are off and more akin to modern politics than the actual world itself. That's not the core audience, that's the expanded audience or the modern audience that you are seeking. That's the side effect of seeking out that type of audience. When you're trying to expand your audience past the core audience and you want to bring in new audiences by adding in new elements, you bring in those types of people. But the thing is, when you bring in those new types of people, you also bring in the issues that they have. So there is a monkey's paw wish that's attached to that. So then you have to make games like the Veligard. You have to make characters like Tosh and stuff like that, because now you are catering to those types of people, those demographics. So now you have to focus on things like non-binary and like pronouns and like transgender stuff, whatever. This is something that people don't necessarily understand, because they think that all the fans, all your fan base is like that, and I don't agree. It's the core audience was always there, the core audience was always interested, and they stuck with you from thick and thin. But if you displace the core audience in a method of trying to expand your audience beyond that, and you bring in this type of fan that is only interested in this property because it's doing something beyond what you actually did originally, this is the type of stuff you're going to get. So then the core fan base is jilted. They're sitting off to the side and they're like, well, they're basically ignoring us for this new fan base, and we told you that we wanted this, and this, and this, and we were happy with those things, but you've changed those things to appeal to these other people over here. So I'm just going to go do something else. I'm going to play something else. And if something bad happens because of you going after this audience, well, then so be it. That's what that is. That's more that than it is you thinking the entirety of your fan base is trying to bully you into something, whatever. I think you're looking at portions of this expanded audience you brought in, and you are basing your opinions off of that. You're broad brushing your entire fan base just because of it. So that leads you to do things like distancing yourself from social media, distancing yourselves from the audience, distancing yourselves from everybody, because a segment of people that you brought in or you were chasing after now have turned on you, and you are now questioning whether you should get off of Twitter and get off of Blue Sky and get away from your fan base. That's what that is. That's what I'm guessing that is. Like I said, it's the people that loved you from the beginning that are kind of watching you fail and looking at that and saying, yeah, I told you. But it's the people that you're chasing, you're actively chasing and trying to bring in, are trying to bully you into making these new choices, whatever, or putting pronouns in your games, or changing male, female to type 1, type 2, or type A and type B. And I think you kind of have to pick and choose the types of criticisms you take. It's like, I was reading Bakuman like forever ago, and he kind of mentioned that. He's like, yeah, you can listen, you can read fan mail, whatever, but I wouldn't take too much out of what the fans like are requesting you to do, because that might completely alter what it is that they came in for. If people came to your product because they liked what it was doing beforehand, then changing that because your demographics are changing to be something entirely different is going to push away everybody. You can't please everybody all the time. And the moment you try to please everybody, you please no one. Much of Gaider's comments here are nonsensical, but at the heart of it, he appears upset that gamers are not swallowing the next corporate product. He's angry that not adhering to the code of the pop cult. Don't ask questions, just consume product and get excited for next products. As far as the comments about gamers wanting to fail, this appears to be a new narrative in order to shame gamers. However, this is nothing wrong with wanting games to fail, and in fact, there is cause to rejoice in some of these games failing. I don't know if this is a new narrative or not, or is it just him not understanding his own audience? I don't know, but it kind of reminds me of another Kotaku in Action thing that I saw a little while ago. So this is a Game Informer paper magazine from 2008 showing the most trusted companies, or who fans thought were the most trusted companies. Once upon a time, people believed that Ubisoft, Capcom, and EA were among some of the most trusted companies of that year. And it's wild that we've gone from this far to people basically not trusting these companies at all. But that kind of plays a large part in how things have been going. You decided, instead of focusing on the gamer and focusing on trying to make the best possible product, you completely decided to go all in on politics and listen to people like Anita Sarkeesian. And how's that going for you? I've just looked at the last couple of days of the Summer of Games and State of Play footage, and a lot of the information that I've seen kind of points back that people are all in on trying to make money again. They're going all in on sex sells. They're going all in on like bombastic storylines. They're limiting the amount of politics. I've only seen like maybe 2 or 3 games that look like they're social engineering or political agendas. Now, I don't know if that's true. We could find out a lot of these games that are being released are just kind of hitting you with the hot females and just dumping a whole bunch of Marxism and whatever in the back end. But from this point, right now, just June 7th, it looks to me as if they are trying to win back the audience that they lost through making things like it did back in 2008, 2009. And that's probably you're going to see a lot of that going forward because people are tired. The social engineering, the culture war stuff, it's not going to last forever. And we're already seeing that the repercussions of the culture wars, mainly people abandoning a lot of the stuff and just kind of moving on towards other things. But yeah, let's keep saying that it's your core audience, broad brushed in with the weirdos that are trying to push certain things is the problem. But anyways, I'm out of here. Thank you for joining for this. See you next boss fight. Take care.